Hey, how are you doing, everybody? Welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we're going to be breaking down some trade advice for Week 12 fantasy football, talking some buy, sell, and hold players here as we enter into this Thanksgiving week of games. So, of course, happy Thanksgiving to you guys. We'll be having some more videos come out throughout the week, but expect a little bit of a lighter video load and more so involvement from myself on the community Discord server, and of course, the comment section, answering your guys' questions for this week. Of course, being with my family and being on the road traveling here, it's a bit harder to record these episodes and get out nearly as much volume as we typically do here. But again, in today's episode, we're going to be having our buy, sell, and hold players, taking a slightly different approach to what we usually do in the trade episodes here on the channel. But for this week, the unique circumstances and getting near the trade deadline, I figured it's worth talking through these scenarios with all of these players. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, you guys, here we go. So we're kicking off today's episode talking through Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Joe is a buy for me this week, so we are going to be attempting to trade for him after the Week 11 performance. The reason for this, of course, a game with fewer than 10 fantasy points and half PPR scoring, and the fact that he sustained an injury, which I do not believe to be detrimental to his long-term outlook this season. Of course, he suffered a concussion, very serious head injury. However, the trend here is that players returning from concussions don't typically see their value and their production impacted down the stretch of the season after suffering such an injury. So for Joe, he had his backup Samaje Perine come in and thrive without him. He had 3 total receiving touchdowns. Actually, either 1 or 2 of those occurred with Joe Mixon still active in that game, but nonetheless, 3 receiving tutties for Samaje Perine. You get the backup in there. Those juices flowing, the potential for Joe to be out this week. We'll see if that's the case or not. He could, of course, clear the concussion protocol. I'm recording this on Tuesday evening, so I don't have a definitive answer just yet. But however, I do feel very comfortable and confident that if not Week 12, Week 13 and beyond, Joe should be good to go here, and he should be having a fairly good outlook as a strong running back, one-level producer for the upcoming weeks in the postseason here. Of course, we're getting towards the fantasy playoffs. The time for playing around here and, making frequent flips on sell high players and buy low pieces is kind of done for now, or at least it is in my book for the most part. So we're looking to really establish those really quality players on our team from this point out and maybe pay a bit more of a premium, because at this point in the season, depth is still important, but of course, you're willing to mortgage that a little bit more here. Najee Harris, the Pittsburgh Steelers running back, who I've been very critical of this season, bashed on him frequently, had him as a sit candidate many times over. I'm going to sell him after this really good performance. Now, this does seem like the easy take to make this week. However, I do think that it is the correct approach if done properly. His price should have increased. The value that you should be fielding from a Najee Harris should be higher than some of the low-end RB2s that you were getting from him a bit earlier in the season. This week, I'd look to sell Najee for maybe a Miles Sanders, someone of that territory, a Dameon Pierce that had a down game. Test the market, see what offers are out there for you. But after his 2-touchdown performance, his first 100-yard scrimmage game of the season, and putting some pretty significant tape on display from this past week's game, I do feel a lot more encouraged after seeing what he did against Cincinnati in terms of what, again, his trade price can net you. So he finally looked athletic. His line looked like he was blocking well. But being honest with ourselves here, we shouldn't expect this new situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense to become the team's norm. After all, Cincinnati's defense has got various injuries. They're banged up, particularly on the back end, which allowed George Pickens to make some money back there and make some big plays happen. And at the end of the day, that's, causing the defense to respect both the run and the pass game for really the first time this season. So for Najee Harris, I do think that the expected outlook is not what just happened this past week, but also hopefully things can get incrementally better from where it was at earlier this season. Really, his value should settle somewhere in between this really big performance from this past week and those, actually down here, terrible numbers that he's had throughout the rest of the season. So again, taking advantage of this big game here, 20-plus points scoring, being one of the most productive fantasy running backs this week, and looking to take advantage of that. He does have a fairly solid playoff schedule, so I wouldn't worry too much if you can't find a significantly beneficial offer for yourself here. However, if that is the case and you're able to get a couple of those players I named earlier, I would go ahead and make this move. DeAndre Swift here, running back for the Detroit Lions. He's been very frustrating. He's been a player that's been incredibly difficult to deal with this season, unfortunately, despite the upside always being there. My advice for Swift owners as we enter into Week 12 is to simply hold. This is not a player that I'm looking to buy at this current point in time. Unfortunately, I've been a big supporter of that idea throughout this season, and it just hasn't timed up here, whether it's been the issues continuing to linger with his health or the fact that his snap count percentage continues to be low. Jamal Williams is having himself a career season, leads the National Football League in scrimmage touchdowns at 12, and has really been the more viable running back of the two for much of this season because of Swift's health and limitations there. You're seeing a situation in a scenario where Swift's value has just continued to get lower and lower, and owners have grown increasingly more frustrated. So this is, again, not a time to sell low here. It is hard to hold on to him, but you're not really going to get that much in return. I think you're much better suited here hoping that maybe if you just hold, something takes a turn for the better. His snap count percentage increases, his usage overall and amount of opportunities per game goes up. I'm not saying that that's, going to happen here, but I also don't think you're going to do yourself a huge favor by selling low on him at this current point in time. Ezekiel Elliott, let's talk through another sell candidate for this week. So Zeke had himself basically a picture-perfect game script here in Week 11, and that's really important to touch on here. Even for Tony Pollard stock, you could consider maybe selling Tony Pollard high, because I do think that in stereotypical games or in expected outcomes of contests where Dallas is, between 25 and 30 points per contest, not up at 40 and completely, just barreling their opponent 40-3, you're not going to have nearly as many rushing attempts. You're not going to have nearly the same level of dominance inflicted upon your opponent. And Zeke's not going to get 2 touchdowns in the goal line every week. Tony Pollard's not going to rip explosive plays every single game that go for a touchdown. It's kind of an interesting dynamic between these two players. Now, Tony kind of got trickled in this conversation because, of course, we have to bring him up here. The point here for trade advice is more so emphasized on Ezekiel Elliott. But the reason I am looking to sell Zeke is because as a backfield mate of Tony Pollard's, we know what Zeke is at this current point in time. He is the sledgehammer back in this offense. He's the power back, the guy meant to move the pile on short yardage situations, the guy who we saw Tony get 2 cracks in the goal line, go 0 for 2 there. They bring in Zeke on 3rd down. He punches it in and scores his first TD of the day against Minnesota. That's his role on this team now. He's going to have good touch counts. He had 15 this past week, which isn't quite workhorse numbers, but it's still very solid. He only had 42 yards, though, so having less than 3 yards per carry is obviously very inefficient. And again, that's the player who he is now. So I would rather have Tony Pollard on my team at this current point in time. Again, we're not looking to go buy Tony because his stock is through the roof right now, and he's been scoring touchdowns and making big plays happen. He is explosive and a very exciting running back to watch. Again, his touch count is you would at least expect, and again, those normal contests, games where Dallas doesn't completely control the tempo and dictate the pace of the game, his touch count should be a little bit lower. I think that this is going to be really close to a 60-40 split at best, one way or another, maybe closer to kind of a 55-45 split. It'll be very even, and the usage will be different, but both of these players will have a role in this offense. I'm just expecting Zeke, who's been kind of nicked up with that knee injury, who comes in here and again has a really underwhelming game from a production standpoint outside of his touchdowns. He finds that end zone 2 times. Take advantage of that. See if you can't just find someone that is, sleeping on some other players as value that have been underproducing the last week or 2. Devin Singletary, another sell candidate for me. We're talking a lot of running backs early here in this video, actually 5 straight running backs. This is really where the most change is needed. If you look at the wide receiver position and the value on the table there, it's a lot harder to make a case to sell some players that are really talented, have frequent weekly roles in their offenses. The running game is a lot different in today's NFL. You're seeing a lot more pass-happy trends, a lot more, overall dependence on the wide receiver position to make plays for NFL offenses. Some teams, like the Buffalo Bills, don't have a strong commitment to the run game. Now, the last 2 weeks here for Devin Singletary, he's had a really good beneficiary relationship with the elbow injury to Josh Allen, or at least that's my takeaway here, is the fact that this team is still kind of trying to figure things out, trying to feel their way through that mess there. But ultimately, I do feel, despite Josh Allen's back-to-back down performances, he is going to be okay here. And sooner rather than later, I expect him to revert back to the traditional Buffalo Bills offense, be a pass-happy team that has little commitment to the run game. And that means that Devin Singletary, who has 4 total touchdowns on this season, who has scored 3 in his last 2 games here, I'm expecting some regression. I don't think these numbers are sustainable. Devin's been very good when given enough opportunities and given the looks that, he needs to be a weekly relevant player. I just don't trust this use to continue. Now, there may be some differing opinions. Maybe you're of the belief that Josh Allen's injury will continue to linger here, but I don't think this Bills staff will let that happen. I think they want to throw the football. They have shown us that time and time again here. And I think that they will continue to throw the football at a high rate. And ultimately, that hurts Devin's stock in weekly utility here. Because if he's not scoring those 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, if he's not having, this inflated value and usage that maintains itself throughout the rest of the year, you're looking at the RB3 level producer that we saw early on this season. Now let's dive into the wide receiver market. Keenan Allen is a buy target for me after this week's games. Despite the fact that he had a really solid showing, the numbers weren't super eye-popping. So I still think there's a window of buying opportunity here for Keenan Allen, who played just 68% of the team's offensive snaps and caught 5 of his 8 targets for 94 yards. He did lose a fumble, which of course in most leagues docks you 2 fantasy points for that play occurring. However, like I said, I was very impressed with what I saw, and barring Allen showing up on the injury report or having documented regression with his hamstring, he looked like his old self out there. He was stretching the field, which is actually not typically something we think of with Keenan Allen, and he was out there sitting down in zone coverage, making plays, getting some yards after catch. It was a really good thing to see, and you could see how Justin Herbert benefited from this, how the offense as a whole became a little bit more smooth and operated at a higher level. It was awesome stuff, and we've been waiting for this painfully for the entire season, and he comes in here again on a pitch count. They were limiting his snaps because if you listened to the reporting throughout the week and were tuned into the pregame show, basically Coach Staley viewed this game as a part of Keenan Allen's recovery road here, and as a game to continue monitoring his status and overall assessing his health. So I was impressed with what I saw. I didn't feel like the injury was hampering his play. Almost went for 100 yards, had 8 targets. Once that snap count goes back up to where it traditionally is, the 90-plus percentile, you're going to see more targets, frequent double-digit target games, hopefully some more red zone use. He was out for most of entire drives, and then would sometimes come in for the red zone packages. So that stuff was nice to see here. The last thing I'll talk about, Mike Williams re-injured and re-aggravated his ankle sprain, which could cause him to miss more time and inevitably result in more target volume for not only Keenan Allen, but Josh Palmer, who just had a monster day as well. Amari Cooper, talking through one of the receivers I had as a buy candidate last week, a potential league-winning wide receiver. I am all in on this wagon right now. I have been talking to Amari Cooper for a couple weeks now. We are holding if you have Amari in your fantasy leagues. It doesn't make much sense to go out and try and buy him after he just had a near 30-point game in half PPR scoring, but did he absolutely ball out. This guy looked phenomenal, played as good of a game as I've seen since 2018 with the Cowboys. He was truly a weapon for that offense on the field. That's what he is for this team. He is the alpha wide receiver 1 here. And if you forgot how talented he is as a playmaker, how his route running on the perimeter sets up deep downfield opportunities, he was winning contested catches this past week as well, and it was really awesome to see that stuff. Now, of course, the big needle mover that we're all hoping here is that Deshaun Watson comes back week 13, provides an extra emphasis on the passing game, and creates more opportunities, more high-quality opportunities at that, and could, maybe take Amari Cooper's value to the next level. That is all yet to be seen, but again, I am holding Cooper here. I am by no means looking to sell high, and I'm here because I do think that there is tremendous top 10 wide receiver potential here for the rest of this season. Jamar Chase, again, we're not playing games anymore. I'm going to put some big ticket players in this episode, talking through expensive names that can net you really high reward here. Of course, Jamar is a superstar that possibly comes at a discount in your league with the fact that his injury is still looming. Now, there is positive reporting that's come out on this week. Apparently, he is off crutches. He is supposed to start running again soon, if he is not already. And it, looks like a week 13 return, which is kind of the date I've had circled this entire time. I'm by no means saying I'm a doctor or a medical expert. I'm just saying that was my prediction. Is looking like it is possible. Now, even if that comes in week 14, the schedule from Jamar Chase, or for Jamar Chase and this Bengals pass catching core for Boyd, for Higgins, for Chase, Chase is excellent. I'm taking advantage of this where I can, getting as many shares stashed on my bench and on my IR as possible for Jamar. I'm willing to give a little bit here. If you're a team that has some, buffer between yourself making the playoffs and missing it. So if you feel very strongly and comfortable in your playoff chances, taking a swing on an injured player isn't always a bad idea, especially when they are the caliber of a Jamar Chase. Just a couple weeks back, it can be a risky business, but we took a shot and a gamble on Jonathan Taylor right here on this channel, and it has paid off 2 straight weeks in a row. So when you're that caliber of player with that level of dependence on you to produce in your offense, you will get the job done unless you are just limping around out there and are extremely unhealthy. Let's not forget, the week that Jamar Chase was diagnosed with this hip injury, he was coming off back-to-back 26-plus point games. So he was absolutely balling out with this fracture in his hip, and they basically said, hey, Jamar, you got to stop playing on this. So this dude is an absolute tank. I have the utmost confidence in him as a player. His schedule, his health, his quarterback, every box is checked for me as long as you have that buffer and can afford to maybe give a starter away because you're going to have to, at least one starter, to acquire Jamar's services and hopefully, maintain some fantasy competence in the meantime. Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, I am looking to sell here. We've been waiting on this for a couple of weeks now. He had himself a really nice game. No Jerry Jeudy. He goes out there as the unquestioned wide receiver 1, catches 5 of 7 passes for 80 yards, and puts up a double-digit fantasy scoring week. Now, we know what this offense is at this point in the season. They are struggling from head to toe. They can't develop a consistent passing game. Their points per game has been abysmal this season. Everything about this offense screams panic from the quarterback position on down. It was one of our biggest misses here on the channel of the offseason. I thought this would be a fantastic scoring group, but they're literally averaging fewer points per game than the freaking Drew Lock Broncos. So I'm looking to get out on this situation if I can. There are plenty of receivers that you could use, and either, maybe you use Courtland plus your RB2 or RB3 or some package to go up and get a Jamar Chase, whatever it is. There's going to be a million different trade options for you in your league based on league size, scoring format, player preferences, all that stuff. So I always welcome your guys' questions in the comment section below. But for Courtland Sutton, I'm looking to get out here. And it sounds like, as well, Jerry Jeudy has dodged a major bullet with that ankle injury, so I would not be surprised to see him active very soon, if not this week, after missing last week's game, and again, avoiding that major injury concern. Finally, one of the more interesting names in today's video, I'll be talking Christian Watson and why I'm going to hold him for the duration of this season. Now, there is definitely a sell high opportunity available, but I also think there's a league-winning component to Christian Watson if he is a player in your flex or in very deep leagues, potentially your wide receiver 2 spot, although that would be quite dire in terms of a player you're depending on of such little, proven competence here. But for Christian Watson, as opposed to selling high, taking advantage of the 5 touchdowns scored in 4 days of time, 2 separate weeks of fantasy football, of course, but taking advantage of that small window of production, I'm not going to try and flip that. I'm going to sit on it here and wait. I'm going to see what exactly can continue happening here, because this is the rookie wide receiver that has the highest level of draft capital investment from his team, has had an early season injury that kind of derailed him for much of the year. He was a guy who was lining up out wide, running a few routes, and then ended up leaving games injured. Injuries were a big portion of the story for Christian Watson here in 2022. Now he's healthy, and we're seeing exactly what he's doing for this Packers team. So I think there's a whole lot of ceiling here. Again, potential league-winning upside if you're able to play him in that flex lineup position. This guy brings it on a weekly basis because he has Aaron Rodgers, and despite the fact that this is not your, typical Green Bay Packers offense, Christian Watson appears to be taking, hold of that wide receiver 1 role for this offense. If he continues to flourish and continues to develop his use in this offense on a week-to-week basis, the sky is the limit for him. This size, this speed, the wingspan that Christian Watson possesses, none of it is average NFL stuff. He brings such a unique and physically gifted skill set to the table that almost no corner or defensive player can match. And if Rodgers continues to give him deep shots, red zone opportunities like we saw against Tennessee this past Thursday, he is going to keep putting up points. Now, This is not Devontae Adams. This is not a 10, 11, 12, 13 target per game guy. You're looking more towards 6 to 8. Hopefully a big play happens, maybe 9 targets if you're lucky, scores a touchdown. There's a lot of opportunity here, though. Again, I'm not looking to sell him here because of what I think he could potentially bring to lineups down the stretch this season, but there is also the element of Christian Watson, and you're not going to really want to go out and pay a premium price to buy a guy who just scored 5 touchdowns and, again, a 4-day span. So taking all that stuff into consideration here, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about the players in today's episode. Are you buy, selling, or holding each player, or what players on your team are you interested in hearing more about? I wanted to talk through some quarterbacks for today's episode, but those were 10 names that we talked through for today's trade advice. So again, to recap, we're holding Christian Watson, selling Courtland Sutton, buying Jamar Chase. We are also buying Joe Mixon, selling Najee Harris, holding DeAndre Swift, selling Ezekiel Elliott, selling Devin Singletary, buying Keenan Allen, and holding Amari Cooper. So 10 names, 10 advice pieces or segments for each player. And if you guys enjoyed today's episode, smash that like button. I appreciate the heck out of all of you for watching today's video and staying with me throughout the whole thing. As always, when you're around here, feel free to smash the subscribe button, turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content, and I will see you in a future episode. Peace out.